Hi guys, we are reading chapter 11 today, Bobo Brazil Meets the Sheik. The next time I woke up, it was just starting to get light, and somehow I was in the front seat and Mama was in the back. When my eyes got used to where they were, I saw Dad holding the steering wheel with one hand and resting his other one on the mirror outside the car. The green lights from the dashboard made his face look puffed up and tired, but he was smiling to himself. I knew what woke me up this time. The Ultra Glide was stuck, and as we drove, the record was saying, "And don't forget who's tech, and don't forget who's tech, and don't forget who's tech, and don't forget who's tech." I started to say something to Dad, but he looked pretty happy, and before I could open my mouth, the record hypnotized me back to sleep. The next time I woke up, it was bright day, and Joey was in the front seat drooling all over me. The Ultra Glide was still saying, "And don't forget who's tech." Dad must have heard me breathe different, because he looked down at me and said, well. Look who decided to come back to life. Hi, Dad. Are we there yet? Oh, no, not you two. You were my last hope. With Vi and Joey and your mother popping up every few minutes asking, are we there yet? It's been like a stuck record. Dad, it is a stuck record. Dad seemed to notice the record player for the first time. Ah, well, Kenny, I'm afraid it's more than a stuck record. Something isn't working right. He lifted the arm off the record and looked in the back seat at Mama, who was asleep. But let's keep that between you and me, okay? Sure. How long before we stop? We'll be at Grandma Sands before you know it. Joey had been listening to us. Daddy, that's what you said the last time. How much longer? I'm sick of this old car. Not too much longer, honey. I'll stay up and keep you company, Dad, I said. Yeah, me too, Joey added. I don't know who conked out first. I didn't remember anything about coming into Alabama. I don't think any of us did, especially Dad. We've been in the car so long that Dad had started growing a little beard. Little tiny hairs were coming out of his face, and most of them were black, but 9 or 10 of them were white. Dad was looking real bad. He was still smiling to himself, but now instead of a real smile, it looked like he was gripping his teeth together to get ready to bite something. The worst thing, though, was that he had turned the radio on and was listening to country and western music. He was tapping his hand on the steering wheel like he was really enjoying it. Dad, do you know what you're listening to? Dad decided to cut up. Kenneth, I've been thinking about changing our names to country names when we get back to Michigan. I'll be Clem, you'll be Homer, Bob will be Billy Bob, and Joey will be Daisy May. And your mother will be, well, I guess her name can just stay Winona. I don't think you're going to find a more country name than that one, do you? Me and Dad cracked up. Mama's head popped up from the back seat and she said in super Southern style, Okay, Clem. I's hopes when you get us to Birmingham, you can explain to these here babies' granny how come you turn them into little zombies sitting in this car so long. Dad laughed. Now, Winona, you know it hasn't been that bad. In fact, I'm going to admit to something that I probably shouldn't. Mama rubbed her eyes and then put her hand on top of my head. You gonna do this here admitting in front of little Homer? Yep. Everybody started waking up, stretching and scratching. Mama kept teasing Dad. And what about some victuals, Clem? The sun been up for hours and you ain't even been out to check them trampolines and see if we have any coon pie for breakfast. Dad yelled out, Yee-haw! And then said, haven't any of you wondered why you've been sleeping like a herd of angels? Byron said, like there's anything to keep anybody awake in this car full of squares. Anyway, Dad said, I'm gonna let the cat out of the bag. I've been using 2 kinds of mind power to keep this trip smooth. First, after a while, I started locking into the road, and there was nothing to it, just the road and the brown bomber all tuned into one hum. As long as I listened to that hum, everything was fine. My biggest worry was you, Winona. I knew after a while you figured out that I wasn't going to stop. You gotta admit, you were good and salty about it at first, right? You know I still am. Mama was upset because of all of her notebook planning had been wasted. But Winona, you gotta admit that once you figured out how much money we'd save by not stopping, you went along with it. Mama kinda grunted, not saying yes and not saying no. Dad cleared his throat and rubbed his hand over his little stubbles that were coming out of his chin. We all knew this was a sign that he was going to start acting a fool. He tested Mama to see how mad she really was and decided it was safe to play around. Yep, he said, rubbing his chin till it made a scratchy sawing sound. 18 hours in a row, nearly 1,000 miles, and I had to deliver a load, and he punched his fist in the air. I delivered it. It was just like this great song I heard a couple miles back. Big Daddy was a truck driving man. And I'm not gonna lie and say it was easy. There was a time I wanted to stop, but when times come, I just think of my old pal, Joe Espinosa, driving all the way to Texas without stopping, and I keep my foot on the tank. Oh yeah, there were times when your mother was giving me dirty looks like she was gonna kill me the first time I slowed down. But I just kept smiling at her and kept the brown bomber chugging on. I tell her, you're right, sweetheart. We'll just go a little bit further. And you kids, you talk about some pathetic, tortured-looking little faces. Yeah, I swear I've been looking at your faces. A car can age a kid 40 years. I've been wondering where my little babies were, but these 3 bad disposition, sour-faced, middle-aged midgets came from. But your sorry little mugs couldn't stop me either. In spite of all your crying and bawling and moaning and wailing and gnashing of teeth, I kept pushing on. Dad must have been getting real tired. He hardly ever talked this much straight. I gotta to admit to another trick too, but I can't take full credit for this one. I hoped Dad was gonna say that I helped him by keeping him company. But no, some of the credit has to go to Scientific Popular. That was the name of the magazine that Dad had come in the mail every month. It had real cool covers, where there was always drawings of people smiling, next to cars with wings and private submarines, or eating a whole meal in one pill. The covers were real interesting, but the insides were real boring. Yep, good old Scientific Popular. They had an article about sound frequencies, and it said that certain sounds cause certain effects in all living things, even the weird Watsons. It was the sound of one of those vacuum cleaners that can put a baby to sleep. And it works. Mama laughed a little. It was strange for us to see Dad talking so much. When we first hit Alabama and had a bunch of miles to go, you kids were popping up like prairie dogs, crying and whining, saying, "How much longer? Mama, make him stop." "And is Birmingham over there?" All I did was use that vacuum trick. I started buzzing like a Hoover vacuum, and you guys dropped off in seniority. First Joey dropped, then Kenneth, then Daddy Cool, and then even you, Walona. Shoot, you guys were out cold from state line on. I threw a blanket over you in the back seat, and then even those whines and whimpers and moans you guys were making didn't bother me. And you, Walona, once I got buzzing, the only thing that was coming out of your mouth was drool. "Is that what that sound was?" Mama asked. "I thought you were driving so long you had lost your mind." "I'm not still sure you haven't." Everybody woke up, but it was a fake wake up. We were all back to sleep, even though it was morning. The next thing I remember, I was waking up back in the back seat, and Mama was saying in a real southern voice, "Babies, we home." Mama was honking the horn of the brown bomber like she was crazy. I raised my head out of the seat to look at what Mama was calling home, and couldn't believe it. Birmingham looked a lot like Flint. There were real houses, not little log cabins, all over the place, and great big beautiful trees. Most of all, though, there was the sun. Me, Joetta, and Byron unfolded ourselves in the Alabama heat, and it was like we were all remembering all at once that we were going to finally see what Grandma Sands really looked like. We all bunched up together by Mama's door, but she didn't get out. She was still honking like the horn, like a nut. We had to cover our ears. Dad said, "Lord, nothing's changed." The door of the regular old house opened. Me and Joey had never seen Grandma Sands in our lives. Byron said he could remember that she was the meanest, ugliest person in the world, but was probably lying. He was only 4 the last time Mama and Dad were here. Byron said he had nightmares for a couple of weeks after they left Alabama 10 years ago. All the weird Watsons have real good imaginations, but none of us was ready for what came out of that house. I was expecting a troll. I thought Grandma Sands would be bigger than Dad. I thought she'd be foaming at the mouth like she had rabies. I remember a couple years ago how Mama had cried and cried when someone called from Alabama and told us Grandma Sands had had a little stroke. So I knew she walked with a cane now. I imagined the cane would be as big as a tree trunk with crows and owls and lizards living in it. What came out was a teeny weeny old woman that looked just like Mama would if someone shrank her down about 5 sizes and sucked all the juice out of her. Grandma Sands waved a little skinny stick in the air and said, "Well, what y'all doing here today? You ain't supposed to be here till Monday. Man, if you think Mama can talk Southern style, you should hear Grandma Sands." Mama was blubbering and smiling and covering her mouth with both hands and ran right up on the porch and nearly broke the little old woman in half. "How you doing, Mama?" she cried on the woman's shoulders and then held Grandma Sands out to look at her. "You look so good." Boy, Mama can lie when she wants to. "Y'all come over here and give your granny a hug," my Southern style mother said. Me and Joey and Byron shuffled over in a little crowd, and when we got through pushing each other forward, I was at the front and had to go to the porch to hug Grandma Sands first. I tried to be real careful with her. She was just a little taller than me and skinnier than anything I'd ever seen alive. I could see her brown scalp right through her curly silver hair. Grandma Sands squeezed me hard and cried all over. She wiped a bunch of tears away with a twisted up hand and blinked a couple of times before she looked at me. She was so short she didn't even have to look down. She tried to say something, but she couldn't talk. She just stuck her bottom lip out and nodded and some of her head up and down a couple of times and then pulled me back and squeezed me like crazy. Mama slapped the back of my head and said, "Kenneth Barnard Watson, you best quit acting so silly and give your grandmother a good hug." I squeezed her little. A smell like baby powder came out of her, and when I did, I really think I could feel her lungs when I touched her back. I don't know what got Joey started, but she was off to the races with her tears. She was the only one who'd practiced what she'd say to Grandma Sands. She sniffed a couple times and said, "Hi, Grandma Sands. It's a pleasure to meet you." You could only half understand what she was saying because she was blubbering so much. Grandma Sands matched Joey tear for tear and then squeezed each other for a while. Then Grandma Sands got her little squeaky voice back and said to Mama, "Lord, Lorna, if this child ain't you, look at this baby, just as pretty and sweet as you." Mama and Joey grinned like two nuts. Byron was next. This is what I had dreamt about. These were the two meanest, evil people I'd ever known and knew only one of them was going to come out of this alive. There was going to be a battle, something like Godzilla met King Kong, or if Frankenstein met Dracula, or like when the wrestler Bobo Brazil meets the other wrestler, the Sheik. I'd imagine that a week or two after we got back to Flint, we'd get a phone call from Alabama with the winner of the big battle on the other end. If it was Byron, he'd kind of talk cool and low out of his corner of his mouth and say, "Shoot, man, you better come get this old chick. I ate her alive." If Grandma Sands won the battle, we'd have to hold the phone away from our ear as while she shouted, "Lona, you call this child bad. This little saint is ready to come back north and go to Sunday school and scrub all y'all's floors." But as soon as I saw Grandma Sands, I knew that Byron would destroy this poor old woman. I was even afraid Mama might decide not to leave him in Alabama. Byron walked up to the porch real cool and kind of bent over to give Grandma Sands a hug. Grandma Sands squeezed him hard. "Lorna, what you teach these babies up north? Don't they know how to give no one a proper hug?" She held Byron by the arms and looked at him from the top. "You've grown up to be a fine-looking boy. You was so puny when you was born, we nearly worried about you." "Got strong." She slapped Byron's arm and he kind of laughed. Grandma Sands reached up and ran her wrinkly old hand over Byron's head. "A little short on the hair, but we're going to get together just fine. What you think, Bi?" "Yes, ma'am." Good, good. See, there's lots of things you can do here. Mr. Roberts ain't as much help as he used to be. All them things he used to do, now you can do." Mama said, "Who? Mr. Who?" Dad came up on the porch and got a ton of hugs, then tears too. Then Grandma Sands pulled everybody together. Her little arms could only get around one person at a time. But as we weird Watsons stood there, some of us laughing, some of us crying, some of us looking cool, it felt like we were all wrapped in one big ball. Grandma Sands kept saying, "My family, my beautiful, beautiful family." Except with the Southern style accent. All the weeping, it sounded like she said family. Finally, the crowd started breaking up and Grandma Sands said, "Now, what am I going to feed y'all? I was expecting you on Monday. Me and Mr. Robert usually have leftovers on Sunday. but I guess if I'll go down to Job's and pick up some chicken tonight. You good at following directions, Bi? Huh? Byron's face twisted all up. What? Grandma Sand's voice popped up like one of those brown grocery bags being snapped open. Bi looked surprised and said, ma'am. You good at following directions? Job, it's just a little walk. I said, he can follow directions real good, Grandma Sands. He's not as dumb as he looks. I shut up real quick and wish I hadn't said anything when Grandma Sands looked at me and said, Lona, maybe there's two that should be spending the summer down here with their granny. Everybody started going inside that ugly little house, and Mama sounded worried. Mama, who is this Mr. Robert? Grandma Sands laughed like she was the Wicked Witch of the West and said, Honey, we gotta talk. You just be patient. And soon he gets up, I want y'all to meet him. Soon as he gets up? Aw, Mama. Mama sounded real upset and disappointed and southern, but not as disappointed as me. The way Byron kept his head down and was smiling and saying, yes, ma'am, this, and no, ma'am, that. It looked like he had surrendered before even the first punch was thrown. Instead of King Kong and Godzilla, it was like King Kong and Bambi. Instead of Bobo, Bouzouki, and the Jill, it was like Bobo and Captain Kangaroo. Instead of Dracula and Frankenstein, it was like Dracula and the giraffe, and Byron was all neck. He knew exactly what I was thinking. After Grandma Sands gave us directions, Byron looked at me sideways and said, What the heck you staring at? I just shook my head. What'd you expect? I asked. You seen her? That bird's old as dirt. She's so old I bet she used to step over dinosaur turds. I ain't gonna have her death on my hands. I knew that was a lie. It seemed like all the fight was out of Byron, and we'd only been in Birmingham a couple of minutes.